Hey, I wasn't going to do a third video about buckshot, the secret stuff, but come to find out the first video, some of the sound was messed up. For some reason it didn't transfer over when I uploaded it, or whatever to call it, to from iMovies, which is where I do my editing, to YouTube, and the part where I was talking about my transmission didn't come through, so I'll do this little short video about the transmission. We're just going into the shop here. Been getting the final tweaks done to the Spirit of Deer Power for taking it to the pull next Friday. Had a fuel leak, and I want to check, make sure the water injection was working all right. And I still got to hook it to something and let out the clutch and turn on the water and make sure the water is not flooding it and that it's kind of enough water. So anyway, but on buckshot, let's get to that. This is the shop that I was using to build buckshot. It did not have all these tools in it. The lathes and mill machines and jigs and stuff and toolboxes and whatever. There was actually room in here to work. But some of the same trophies are still up there, like from 1984, 1986 and stuff like that. But anyhow, this is the shop that I was working on buckshot in, and I knew I was going to have to put some kind of gears in the rear, in the transmission, so I could have a proper pulling gear. In the 4010s and 4020s, you make your splitter gear, your 7.5 gear out of your PTO gears, and you double up on them and take your second and fifth gear out and weld them in there where those were. Doesn't work that way on the 5020. I need to find some gears, so there are several places around here. I call them tractor trailer junkyards, but they have places that work on semis, rebuild transmissions and stuff, and they were up closer to Baltimore, and I would go up there with some crates and some bushel baskets, and they had piles of gears in the back, ready to be scrapped at some point. But they just had piles and piles of gear. I'm talking piles that were like 10-15 feet tall and just, 60 feet long, just piles of gears, and the base of them would be 50 feet wide. Unbelievable amount of gears. I would just go up to the office and say, hey, can I buy some gears for scrap price? And I'll go back there and just grab a whole bunch of gears, like from a Fuller 905 truck transmission. I think that's the right numbers. Been a long time. And I'd come home with crates and bushel baskets full of gears, and I'd give them a couple bucks for them. Or sometimes they just want enough money to buy the mechanics pizza for lunch or something. But anyhow, I come home with a lot of gears, and here still got some of them in the pile over here. This is where I pile some of them up underneath the workbench over here. There's still a whole heap of them under there. Some of them are straight cut gears, which are much easier to work with. Some of them got some bevel cut on them, and I've worked on both kinds. I got some half gears in my 4010s, and that I made from those gears. And anyhow, in buckshot, I'd come home, I'd measure the distance between the shafts in the transmission and start counting teeth, and I'd set them down there, and I'd find the right ratio that I wanted and start measuring, see if it was the right distance between the center to center to fit the shafts. And usually you could get real close, believe it or not. And I'd use not just 2 gears, I'd use 4. I'd double them up, weld them 2 side by side. On the one on the counter shaft, and then we had on the other one was the other shaft was not on a collar, but I guess I'll call it it's I don't know what else to call it, a collar. Anyhow, it was what 2nd and 5th would have been. Yeah, you cut that off and cut all the teeth off your counter shaft, and you weld a gear on there, and then you weld the other one next to it. And I found out that you gotta clamp between a couple of teeth some in like 4 different places, the shank or some bolts or something that'll fit down in between the teeth real good. Clamp them together, because it's hard to believe when you're welding them gears. I could have one gear welded on there, and I'd set the other one on there, line up the teeth real good, and start welding. And if I didn't have something clamped in there, the teeth would move enough so that it would. I'd have to get at my grinder and grind them to even up the edge of the gear teeth. So, but anyhow, at any rate, that's what I used. I found out the ratio I was looking for, because I didn't have any idea what I needed to put in there. I just put something that was about halfway between 7th and 8th gear, and got out my cutting torch, cut the teeth off, cut the gear off, cut the teeth off the counter shaft, and cut the gear off of the, I'll just call it a collar. Oh, it's not the right name. But on my pinion shaft, and welded them all on there, got them good and straight, touched them up with the grinder to make sure all the teeth were hitting just right, and put them in there and went pulling. Then later on, I needed some higher gears as time went on, and I could start to run road gear and still have plenty of power for running road gear. I actually, what's in there right now, when I was done pulling, I have overdrive gears, overdrive in the transmission. It's like 50% overdrive in that transmission, overdrove the transmission 50%. And because I was planning on putting 3 turbos on, I actually had the setup all built. And I think if I had come out with that back then, it would have been pretty competitive. But I don't know, just time got short. Had kids, my father was getting older, and time was not there for it, and I still had the interest in the drive, but I had to cut way back on that. And then when I did get back into pulling, I wanted my dad to be involved, so we I built an antique tractor for him, and then I built one for myself, that hazardous material, that 70 with the turbo on it, which I'm going to do some videos on here sometime. But at any rate, that's what I had in buckshot transmission. I'd go to the tractor trailer junkyard, I called it, and find a bunch of scrap gears, come home, find some that are the right ratio and that the teeth fit together, and weld them on there and assemble the transmission and go pulling. It did break on me once, in, I think it was Madison, Virginia. They had a really, really tight clay track. I was going up the track, and I felt something hit me in the back of the head. I said, what in the world is that? And when I got done my pull, I went to pull my helmet off, and it was stuck to the back of my helmet was a chunk of red clay the size of a softball, and that's what it hit me in the back of the head. It was slung off the tires. But anyhow, at some point during that pull, it shucked a couple of teeth off one of the gears I had made. So I came home and welded the teeth back on. And and in that winter, I went ahead and made some other arrangements in there for gears. But anyhow, that's what was in the transmission. Right or wrong, it was cheap and it worked. At one point in the transmission, it gave me like a just under road gear, like 7.8 gear, I called it. I took my 7th gear, cut the gear off the counter shaft, and welded that to the collar on my pinion shaft, and one from the pinion shaft I welded that on my counter shaft, and that gave me like 7.8 gear is what I call it. It was just a little bit below road gear. So the only problem was the bevel was going the wrong way. It was thrusting to the back, so I made a heavier bearing in the back and a bearing holder, and I never had any trouble with it. So, but anyway, necessity is the mother of invention. That's the way it is. All right, y'all have a good evening. We'll catch you later. Bye.